Hello, dear ones. Father Peter John coming to you from All Saints Orthodox Church in Bloomington, Indiana. Christ is in our midst. I want to talk to you today about another fool for Christ. His name is Saint Feofil of the Kiev caves. He was born in the late 18th century and was actually a twin. And when he was a nursing infant, he had some trouble with nursing. For some reason, he wouldn't eat well on certain days. His mother felt like she was becoming distant from him, and she became hard-hearted against him. And so this is where the story actually, it's a difficult story, so forgive me, but it is difficult. His mother ordered the servant girl to go and take Feofil and throw him into the river. Well, the servant girl feared God, and she refused again and again until finally the mother would not relent. And so she went down and she tossed the baby in the river and made the sign of the cross over him and begged God for forgiveness. He floated to the top and then crossed over the river on the other side, not walking but floating, and ended up on the dry shore. And so she didn't know what to do. So she went over and she got him and she threw him in again, and this time he floated to a small island in the middle of the river. Well, she didn't know what to do. She went and got the baby. She went back to the mother. She told the mother, "This is God's will. The child is supposed to live. We can't do this." Well, at which point the mother went down to the mill, and she took him and she threw him into the water there at the mill. And she turned around to walk home when all of a sudden she heard the mill come to a grinding stop. At which point the miller came out because he heard the commotion, and he looked and he sees this baby floating in the water there at the mill. The miller decided to raise Feofil, and so he did for a time until another woman came and said, "I don't have any children. May I please raise this child?" And so in this way, he actually was passed around from home to home. He was a foster child, passed around from home to home. And through all of this, he became very, very prayerful. And he always had this sense. His desire was to be reunited with his mother. He prayed for her heart to be softened. And he did this throughout his entire childhood. Anyway, Feofil eventually goes to become a monk. And he ends up working his way up the ranks very quickly, not because he was ambitious. He didn't want to work his way up the ranks in the monastery. It was just that he was very holy. He was very devout. He was very prayerful. As all of this is happening, he found out that his mother was dying of a terminal disease. So he prayed again, and then he went to their house, and he went to go see his mother, hoping for some peace and reconciliation on this side of the veil. When his mother saw him, her heart was broken, and she embraced him, and she begged his forgiveness. He blessed her with the sign of the cross, and in a warm embrace, she fell asleep in the Lord right there in her son's arms. Well, now he was free. His father had died at an early age. His mother was now gone, and he began to pursue the spiritual life, to pursue Christ in a way that he never had. He had already been devout, right? But he kicked on the jets, so to speak, and his prayer life increased. His service of everyone else increased. He was ordained a deacon. Then he was ordained a priest. After he was ordained a priest, he was actually made the steward of a very prestigious monastery. And the problem with this is, again, he wasn't ambitious. He didn't want great status in the world. He didn't want these great responsibilities. He didn't want the praise of men. And so he asked to be released, but was refused. So what do you do at that point? You become a fool for Christ. So that's what he did. Saint Feofil began to do things that were a little bit off. I think he was trying to basically make the superiors of the monastery think that he wasn't really to be trusted, or wasn't really trustworthy, as it were, with caring for the affairs of the monastery. In any case, his feet were uncovered, right? So his feet were always cold in the winter and baking in the summer. his monastic garb, they say that he didn't button it in the front, so it just always looked very shaggy. It was just kind of hanging off. And when it hangs off, then it scrapes on the ground and it starts to become frayed. So another thing, he was always seen carrying a basket. He always had a basket of goods with him for the poor. Everywhere he went, he would go and he would find people who were in need and he would give it to them. He actually put a coffin in his cell, but he didn't sleep in the coffin like some of the monastics did, right? He filled it with goods for the poor. That was kind of like his food pantry. And so whenever he found someone was in need, he could go there to this coffin and he would take some of the stuff, put it in his basket, and go out and minister to the poor. In church, when it was his turn to read the Psalter, again, I mean, it's just kind of funny, because this is a saint. This is a wonder-working saint, right, of a man. And you hear these stories, and it just kind of makes you chuckle a little bit. When it was his turn to read the Psalter, right, he would go and he'd read very quietly like this. He would just read very quietly, and nobody in the church could hear him. And so the other monks in the church would say, Feofil, speak up, Father Feofil, louder. And so every time they said that, he'd get quieter and quieter. They started to really, the other monks, I think they were envious, but then also they just wanted to tease him because he was, a fool for Christ. And so one day, one of the elder monks, took his Psalter, his book of Psalms, took it and hid it in his cassock. Feofil came into the church, and again, he had this gift of insight and clairvoyance. He came into the church, he went directly to the monk who had hidden his Psalter, and he looked at him and he said, Elder, elder, he said, you will die tomorrow, and here you are spending your time playing tricks on people. You shouldn't do this. And that elder died the next day. Well, when it was time for Saint Feofil to end this life, he foresaw it. He was told by God that it would happen. And so he called somebody and he said, bring a box to my cell. Now you'll remember this story somewhat from the movie Ostrov, the island. And I believe this is where they got this scene, where he called somebody, he said, just bring in a box, a wooden box to my cell. And then he climbed inside of the box, and then he looked at the monk and he said, tell the abbot that Feofil has departed and to ring the bells. And so this man left and he went and he told the abbot, and they rang the bells, and sure enough, Feofil fell asleep in the Lord and rested and was joined with Christ in paradise. Through the prayers of Saint Feofil of the Kiev caves, that fool for Christ, O Lord, have mercy upon us and save us. Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be.